All right, and so Richard has won the play. He's going to be won the die roll. He's going to go ahead and be on the play. And we're off here. He starts with Temple Garden. And so Erik Smith's deck, to me, seems like this is like the most mid-range deck we've had so far. It's really like that Jund mid-range style deck. Obviously, there's no red, but, you know, it's incremental card advantage, removal spells.
A little bit of life gain along the way with Scavenging Ooze and Courser of Krufix, even a Primeval Bounty to top off the curve. So this is a pretty radical departure from most of the black splash green lists that we see.
All right. So we see, right now we see Nguyen's hand. He has 3 lands. He has Boros Reckoner, Celestia Charm, and double Fleece Main Lion. The Lions are the kind of cards that can, if Nguyen ever gets a counter on them, can be very hard for a mid-range deck like this to deal with. So he's going to go ahead and take one of those. Yeah,
most mid-range decks do something like try to invalidate it with Elspeth or use Devour Flesh or something along those lines. But once you go monstrous with it, it is tough to answer.
All right, and so that's what Thoughtseize will take. And Nguyen will get the other Fleece Main Lion on the table. Or it looks like there are a pair of Devour Fleshes waiting in the wings for it from Smith. Yeah, this one will get eaten. Nguyen goes to 22. Board is still clear.
And Devour Flesh is very good against Brave Naya. Not only can you not Brave the Elements or Boros Charm to save your threat, or even Ranger's Guile in Richard's list here, but so much of the power of this deck comes from the fact that your creatures are individually pretty tough to answer. Cards like Boros Reckoner, Fleece Main Lion, Soldier of the Pantheon come in with built-in resistance to some classes of removal, but Devour Flesh just blows the whole thing up.
Yeah, and we see Smith making a Temple of Malady. Looks like he's going to ship the card to the bottom. And what Nguyen, or he's going to keep it, it doesn't decide. What Nguyen's deck's trying to do is it's just trying to make a threat after threat and hope one of them sticks. We see a Devour Flesh from Smith there, and he has a pair of Abrupt Decays in his hand. I'm not positive any of these are going to stick.
Yeah, in these sort of games, Richard's best tool is 4 copies of Voice of Resurgence, which, of course, we have not seen him play just yet. That's a very good answer to Devour Flesh and just removal spells in general, but otherwise, his threats just don't line up very well against cards like Devour Flesh, Hero's Downfall, Abrupt Decay, and so on.
As we see Dryad Militant from Nguyen, and his last 2 cards are Celestia Charm and Boros Charm. So he has fewer creatures than Smith has kill spells, and Smith just buying time and now playing out a Pack Rat.
And this is a tough spot for Richard, of course. Erik at 18 life, nowhere near close to being in Boros Charm range, and this Pack Rat could take the game over by itself. Again, the only answers to this in Richard's list, 3 copies of Lightning Strike, and his threats otherwise do not line up very well against Pack Rat. Just a lot of 2/2s and 3/3s, the type of threats we're used to seeing Pack Rat just take care of pretty easily.
Yeah, and he would have had to have top deck Lightning Strike that turn to get Pack Rat off the battlefield. He did not. He hit a land. And now Dryad Militant will abruptly be decayed. Nguyen has to decide whether or not he wants to save it. It's only a 2/1. Going to be outclassed by Pack Rat as soon as next turn.
Yeah, this is one of those rock and a hard play spots where, is it worth saving this Dryad Militant? No, probably not. But what are you doing with this Boros Charm? Otherwise, right. Not very much. It's the reverse side of the split. Usually you like the split card decision to be, I'm picking one of 2 good things, but it's choosing between one of 2 bad things for Richard right now. It shouldn't be, but it doesn't matter.
Yeah. I believe, so he just goes ahead and lets the Dryad Militant get Abrupt Decayed. Abrupt Decay will be in a graveyard, though I don't believe that matters.
Yeah, it's one of those things where if it's a spell that deals damage to kill the Militant, it is exiled because of the way that state-based effects worked.
Right.
But if it is a Doomblade effect,
resolution.
Right. If it's a Doomblade effect, then that just lands in the graveyard because it's no longer there on resolution. The Militant's no longer in play on resolution. Just one of many nice, very subtle wrinkles to Magic's rule set.
Well, so Smith's showing his hand a little bit with what his deck's doing. In case Nguyen thought it was just black-green Devotion, he discards Courser of Krufix there to pump Pack Rat while leaving up an Abrupt Decay.
And what's interesting about that is Erik has now revealed that his deck is doing something else. Nothing he has done thus far indicates he's anything other than black splash green Devotion. The Courser of Krufix reveals that his deck's doing something completely different, and there might have implications for this when the players go to sideboarding.
All right, so if you're Richard and you see a discard of Courser of Krufix, like, obviously something's up, right? Mm-hmm. What assumptions do you make about Smith's deck? You know,
there's a lot more green mana and possibly more green spells. You know, all the all the other cards that he's played thus far still line up with that sort of strategy, just removal spells and Pack Rat, Mutavault and so forth. But you respect the possibility that something like Pal Chronos could be in his deck, for example.
I would assume, like, yeah, there's probably no Night Veil Spectre anymore, right?
Right.
That seems, you know, it may be Lifebane Zombie, but probably not Night Veil.
Right. Yeah, you can start drawing some conclusions.
Not much, though.
Yeah. Also, if he's playing with Corsair Crewfix and potentially seeing more lands and more cards, maybe multiple copies of Vraska is something that's in play. You can start drawing small conclusions, but nothing too radical. In the meantime, though, it doesn't really matter too much about what the texture exactly of Erik's deck is, as Pack Rat has a way of not really caring about such things.
Yeah, he made a 3rd Pack Rat, has mana for a 4th Pack Rat, and has 2 Mutavaults. This will be a 2-turn clock, most likely. It's going to want to save. So interestingly, Smith is already out of Mizium Mortar's range, even if Nguyen were to have one, because he has 2 mana up to activate both Mutavaults and make his Rats 5. Well, no, that wouldn't get you out of range. Just kidding, that would not. Because they die.
It needs to be actually Rats.
They have to be Rats. The Mutavaults don't count there.
Yeah, the Mutavault dies, and then the House of Cards collapses. So
right,
it has to be actual Rats.
I had to think about that for a second. I was like, wait, that doesn't work. But the swing in, nonetheless, is for 8. That puts Nguyen down to 12. And he's in a tough spot. Still with Boros Charm in his hand. He has Boros Reckoner now. And the Rats are just going to keep growing.
Brave Naya is a curious metagame choice to me right now, because so many decks are going out of their way to play Abrupt Decay, and this is a deck that's especially poorly suited at fighting Abrupt Decay.
Right. I think your entire creature base is susceptible to Abrupt Decay.
Yeah, I'm not bending over backwards to play Fleece Mainline and Boros Reckoner when that's the card that's floating around everywhere, you know?
Right.
Now, this deck's still quite potent, does a lot of powerful stuff, and we did see it come in 2nd in an open recently, but in terms of metagaming against the card Abrupt Decay, this deck does a pretty poor job at it.
Yeah, he does have some protection, as you can see in his hand, both a Ranger's Guile and a Boros Charm. And end step, Smith is going to try to Abrupt Decay the Reckoner. I guess Nguyen has to decide if he even wants to show these cards. I mean, none of them are that unusual.
Well, Ranger's Guile is unusual.
Yeah, I wouldn't show the Guile.
Ranger's Guile is pretty sweet here because you can leave up, you know, your opponent's going to play around Boros Charm, they're going to play around Brave the Elements. When you leave up Stomping Ground and have Ranger's Guile in your hand, your opponent's likely to just not play around anything.
Yeah. Nguyen does Ranger's Guile there. Now, I'm wondering, so the reason I was saying is I don't know if this game's winnable from Nguyen's side, which is why I'm not sure I would play the Guile yet. Like, I don't, you know, he's very far behind.
Yeah, the issue here is not even Brave the Elements gets Richard out of the spot, because Erik has multiple Mutavaults on defense that he has access to if he's feeling so inclined.
Right, a lot of times when they're behind, Brave Naya will have a situation where they can, you know, they can Brave the Elements across for the last damage.
Erik still has to respect the possibility of something like Brave the Elements this turn, Richard doesn't die, doesn't lose any of his creatures, shoots Erik with the Boros Reckoner trigger, untaps, draws something significant. So yeah, Erik still needs to take his time and think about things. He's a heavy favorite from here, but Richard really dwindling on the number of outs and productive draws he has from this point.
Richard, he has to respect, so Richard's hanging onto a Boros Charm for the possibility of a play like Gore Clan Boros Charm.
Yes.
You know, that is actually a swing that is 414. And I don't believe, like I believe if Smith has no answers to it, that is lethal, because if you do it on Boros Reckoner, then any damage that's soaked up is dealt back to Erik. So he's leaving himself an out of Gore Clan Rampager plus Smith has nothing right now. That would do the lethal 14.
Right.
But that's about it. And at least by the look of things, the Smith has nothing part of the plan we're great on. He taps out to deal additional damage.
Yeah, I mean, this is 12 coming across right now, so this is lethal if Richard has nothing.
So he's not going to get to live through this with his Reckoner.
Right.
Okay, well then I don't think he has outs, because he doesn't have any attacks. But
oh no, apologies. There's only one unblocked rat, so this is not lethal.
So Boros Reckoner dies, its trigger is going to be thrown over to something else. So had he not blocked with the rat, Yeah, it would have been lethal had he not blocked
Right.
2 rats.
So he had to double block there.
Right, and that's what the second mutavault forced that, which means Nguyen had to chump away his out.
I mean, there's some risk with going up to 6 here, because that means that the trigger going to Erik means that he goes to 8, and 2 copies of Boros Charm kill him.
All right, so now his out's another Boros Charm. Can he do it? That's what it's going to take.
Some risky stuff. I mean, I don't think he had to go all the way up there. There's one.
There's Mana Confluence.
So Richard actually got himself into a spot where there was a draw, which is surprising, because I assumed he was just dead.
Well, if Smith doesn't make that attack, then Gorklan Rampager is a lethal draw.
Well, he doesn't need to pump with both the Mutavaults, is my point. He's only in this position
he
now
doesn't-
because he took 6 from the Boros Reckoner trigger. That wasn't
Right,
necessary.
okay, so he had to represent, but then he had to represent the Mutavaults, but then not actually use them.
Yeah, exactly. He could use 1, and then that puts him at 9, but...
Yeah, Smith.
Yep.
I like win Boros Charm Smith down to 4, and then Mana Confluences him and concedes. Shows the last card. So Erik Smith up 1 game in a game that I think he was in control of the whole way. What I like about Brave Naya from an aggro deck is it really can steal games better than most aggro decks.
Well, there's a lot to play around. I mean, in that position that Erik's in, he's pack-ratted a million turns. He's played a bunch of removal spells. Richard basically has nothing going on at that point, and the game ends in a spot where Richard still has draw somehow. It's pretty impressive. Not a lot of decks have that kind of range in the format, and with Gorklan, Rampager, and Boros draw, you're drawing live in spots where a lot of other control decks are just dead.
Right, exactly. So going on to the sideboard, this is traditionally, like these small creature matchups are ones that a mono black devotion deck would get better against after sideboard. Looking at Smith's sideboard, it's not too different. He does have a pair of Doomblades, he has a Devour Flesh, he has an Ultimate Price, he has a Silence the Believers in his sideboard already, all at the ready. He does have a Drown in Sorrow, but I think the toughness on a lot of Nguyen's creatures are too big for that to be something he wants.
Yeah, it's not bad if it's supplementing other stuff, and there are a lot of targets here. Soul of the Pantheon, Voice of Resurgence, Dry Militant. I think 1 copy is probably pretty high upside. I'm not sure if he's going to want to go beyond that. And in fact, he can't. He only has the 1 copy. But I think there's enough stuff floating around here that it's potentially good.
Yeah, I do have 1 card I want to mention here quickly that Smith has decided to play. He has a Primeval Bounty in the main and a second one in the sideboard.
Probably for other mid-range decks, I would imagine.
Right. Well, so first I think it was for mid-range decks, except that it seems like most mid-range decks have Golgari Charms already. So it's like...
But they aren't necessarily bringing in against Erik. They're bringing in against decks that have the Banishing Light Detention Sphere, those kind of mid-range builds. But if you're just straight green-black, there's no guarantee your opponent's bringing it in.
If you have Underworld Connections and Courser of Krufix,
sure,
then, you know, it's not unreasonable to bring it in against you, I wouldn't think.
Although often Primeval Bounty, it doesn't even need to be in play for very long to generate a huge edge. And if the removal is taxed in other places, maybe it's fine. But
sure,
I think 1 copy is pretty high upside. Maybe the second one is extraneous, but it does seem well suited for some of the mid-range matchups at least. On Richard's side, 2 Banishing Lights, 2 copies of Domerad, 2 Glare of Heresy, 2 Keening Apparition, 3 Mizium Orders, 3 Unflinching Courage, and 1 Xenagos the Reveler. This is a spot where revealing that Courser of Krufix may change the way the deck's sideboard here. I think under normal circumstances, if he just suspected Erik was black splash green devotion, he would not touch the Mizium Orders. But now, having seen Courser of Krufix, I think there's a real chance that card comes in.
That said, Erik's not too scared of it, right? He has Course of Krufix, Scavenging Ooze, and Pack Rat. Like, if Nguyen's on the trade 1-for-1 plan, Smith's got to be happy with that.
Well, it's likely to be an upgrade over Lightning Strike. Maybe you would want to keep that card in if you thought that Erik was a black devotion list because it can go to the head, it still kills Nightveil Spectre, all the usual reasons. But now with Courser Krufix on Richard's mind, it's possible that he sideboards a little bit differently and just cuts the Lightning Strikes.
Do you think things like Keening Apparition happen then?
Well, it depends. It really depends on what he wants to cut here. I think that a card like Boros Reckoner should be on the table for him to remove. He maybe just wants to become a little more streamlined here. So I buy bringing in those copies because there's some threats in here that are not really that well suited to the matchup. I think the 1 copy of Xenagos comes in, probably the 2 copies of Domri come in as well. So, although if Richard is bringing in Domri, that's more of an argument to leave Reckoner in the deck. So a lot of this is kind of moving parts sort of stuff. But I'm curious to see how he's going to sideboard. Boros Reckoner was pretty powerful in that game, the way that it played out, but there's a lot of times where it's just going to be a really juicy Abrupt Decay target. And you had to imagine Erik's bringing in more cards like Doomblade as well, so it's unlikely to be as good in post-board games as it was in that game.
Well, Boros Reckoner really shines in creature combat, but as far as damage for mana cost, it's not particularly efficient, and especially not when there's a lot of 2-mana spells that deal with it. Boros Reckoner, I would think, is pretty weak here, but you're right. If he's bringing in Domri, he needs to keep his creature count high, so there is a little bit of there's some tension going on in his sideboarding plans.
There's a lot of times we're playing against black control decks, whether it's Devotion or something like Erik is playing. The only thing that matters of your creatures is literally just power to mana ratio, because the text boxes don't matter very much against Doomblade, Devour Flesh, Hero's Downfall, Thoughtseize, etc., etc. The only thing that really represents a quality creature are ones with high attack to mana ratios, and Boros Reckoner is not that powerful through that prism.
Right. It's like high attack, and if they have a defensive ability, be that large toughness, if they're playing, depending on the type of control, like if they're playing Farika's Cures, or, maybe Reaper of the Wilds or something like that. But yeah, Reckoner has no way to protect itself.
Yeah, something with Farika's Cure protection, that moves up a tier. Something with Bile-Blight protection, that moves up a tier.
Like ultimate price
protection, yeah. Black creatures because of Doomblade. There are small ways in which creatures can matter outside of power to mana, but Boros Reckoner lines up poorly on almost every metric. I mean, there's very few removal spells it dodges outside of ultimate price.
Right. That's a one of in Smith's sideboard.
Right.
Yeah, and it's only 3 for 3 power, so it's not strong.
But if Richard wants to bring in Domri for slower matchups, Boros Reckoner, of course, becomes much more powerful when you have access to Domri in your deck as well. So it's not as simple as just cut them, because in the post-board games, it may be better for Richard than it was in Game 1. Also, Game 1 might just be on Richard's mind, where Boros Reckoner came very close to contributing to him stealing that game, where he should have had no chance.
So we are on to Game 2. Richard starts out on tap lands. We see Gorklan Rampager in his hand and Fleecemane Lion. And a slew of removal spells on the other side of the table. We see Ultimate Price, Hero's Downfall, a very straightforward game plan for Smiths to just kill everything.
Yeah, I'm not sure if how familiar Smith is with the deck Richard is playing in general, but Ultimate Price is really lacking targets. It can kill Soldier of the Pantheon, and that's the end of the list. That's it.
It can kill the Knight token.
Yes,
it can kill Celestia Charm.
So Ultimate, I know Richard's deck, if you're not that familiar, has the look of a deck that would just be playing with random color, monocolored creatures, but that's not going on here.
Fleecemane Lion's Flesh is devoured on turn 2. Nguyen's going to go ahead and shock for a turn 3 Boros Reckoner. And you actually see, though, there's a Soldier in his hand and an Ultimate Price in Smith's. He's going to get rewarded for it.
Yeah. Well, that's one way of putting it.
He's going to get to cast it with a target.
He is going to get to cast it.
And Bile-Blight takes care of Boros Reckoner. See, there we go, though. Boros Reckoner just dodged an Ultimate Price there. Just like you said, it's that defensive ability.
Yeah. It is really well suited to fight against Erik's suite of removal.
Well, there was the Bile-Blight. He just had it. But
you can't beat everything. That's true.
Now, there's 2 other Boros Reckoners in Nguyen's hand. Interesting. So walk me through. Smith decided to main phase Bile-Blight to play around cards like Celestia Charm and Ranger's Guile, as opposed to hoping to get extra value off it.
Yeah, which I like a lot. I mean, Erik's favorite if the game goes longer, and untapping and just taking a Boros Reckoner hit for no reason, especially when it's unlikely that a card like Ranger's Guile or Celestia Charm is going to be very good in this game the way it's shaping up. I think that you just don't get too fancy.
All right. Nguyen, no 4th land, but he replaces the Reckoner, and now we will get to see the rest of his hand. Smith Thought seizes him. He sees Reckoner, Rampager, Militant, and Soldier of the Pantheon. 4 more creatures. And this is really nice. It allows Smith to start, in his mind, matching removal spells to cards.
Yeah, in spots where he doesn't know, should I be leaving up mana this turn? Should I be advancing my board? Now he's going to be working with a lot more information about how he needs to measure his responses to the threats that Richard's going to be adding to the table.
Remaining cards in Smith's hand are Desecration Demon, Ultimate Price, Hero's Downfall, and a pair of lands. So he knows that the price hits the Soldier. Downfall hits, well, it protects him from Gorklan Rampager, really. or it'll just take out Boris Reckoner, and then he has Demon in hand.
It wouldn't be surprising me right now if Erik's just trying to play the game to a spot where keep my life total high and just drop a Desecration Demon, and that's very likely to win the game.
Well, there's an issue with that in that he knows about Gorklan Rampager, right? Because the Rampager actually can push a creature through Desecration Demon.
It's a lot of resources. And he doesn't even have to block with his life total as high as it is. He can wait until he, say, has a removal spell left over.
And Nguyen goes ahead and plays Soldier and Dryad Militant. He's... Oh, Mana Confluence has to be for... Yeah, I was like, I don't know. Okay, there we go.
Okay.
Yeah, he doesn't tap Mana Confluence.
Right, he does not have to tap it. Because the stopping ground...
He meant to play Voice of Resurgence, and now we're going to get a... I think... It's if he said Voice of Resurgence when he played it, then they're allowed to go back and switch that.
Right.
And this, I think there'll be a judge call on that. I believe that's the case. So if you say the wrong card and play something else,
yes,
then I think then you can go back.
A lot of it depends on how much time passes too, because if your opponent generates a physical reaction based on what you said, et cetera, it can be.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and confirm that's what happened. If you don't say anything and play the card, that's like a good reason actually to get yourself into declaring your plays. If you don't say anything, you don't get to back that up. And as you said, Desecration Demon on Smith's side of the table. But does he block? Well, he knows about Gorklan Rampager, right?
Well, he can block Soldier of the Pantheon safely because Richard cannot Rampager it. Right. So it's just Voice of Resurgence, and Erik might be happy to take 2 points of damage for a little while. It's not that big of a deal. He can race that,
Right.
He can untap Ultimate Price the Soldier and then start racing 2 against 6.
Yeah, and remember, with that Ultimate Price, even the Voice token is multicolored, so that Ultimate Price just has Soldier of the Pantheon written all over it.
On lockdown. Iron City lockdown. It still seems worth it to me for Richard to send the Voice of Resurgence in.
He's got to start dealing damage. This Demon's wins in 3 turns, right? He's going to swing the Soldier of the Pantheon. You have to call, right?
Well, again, since you cannot use Gorklan Rampager on it, I would imagine that Erik will call.
I mean, okay. You're in Erik's spot. You're brainstorming. How can this work out bad? 4th land War Leader's Helix, right?
And even then, it's why would he not be attacking with Voice of Resurgence is the question.
Well, he outsmarts us all and gets 2 damage in.
I mean, if it's just going to die to the Ultimate Price anyway, maybe it's worth the bluff.
Yeah, and it's worth the bluff. And if you're Smith, I'm all for playing conservatively if there's a theoretical card that I want to play around. I just can't come up with a theoretical card that Smith's playing around.
Yes, I'm also struggling.
Well, anyway, he's down to 16, and Richard continues to commit to the board, this time in Dryad Militant.
And you can only be so cavalier with your life total against Brave Naya, because as we saw in that first game, the deck is equipped with so much range.
Yeah, it can win out of nowhere. You see Mana Confluence. That's a 1-of in Smith's deck. It was the draw. He's opting to play 1 Confluence and no Guild Gates. He's playing just a split of basics. 3 Mutavaults and a Confluence. And on his turn, Ultimate Price takes out Soldier of the Pantheon. It's due to Voice of Resurgence. He's going to have to do it that way.
And it makes sense for Erik to build his deck that way. He has a lot more incremental life gain than the average copy of Black Devotion does, with his Scavenging Oozes and Coursers of Krufix.
And he's going to attack, so we'll see if there is a tap there from Richard. There's not, and Smith may decide to just start racing here.
Well, taking those 2 points of damage last turn is a big deal because right now Richard's hitting in increments of 4. The 2 creatures he has in play, that's a total of 4 points of damage. The Gorklan Rampager in hand, that's 4 points of damage. So I think that if Erik was at 18, he could start racing here, but at 16, it's really sketchy to start attacking.
Yeah, and he comes to the same conclusion. Desecration Demon is left back on defense. And so now Nguyen's just going to start establishing an aggressive attack here. He has 2 lands and a Gorklan Rampager in hand, so not much. He's going to go ahead and swing the Dryad Militant. This time, Smith's happy to block it. If he has the kill spell, it's not a 2-for-1 because of the Voice, so that's probably still fine.
Yeah, but if Richard's gone down this far to attack, he's committed to doing this in my mind.
Yep.
It looks really bad there if Erik rather has a removal spell, but You can't make that attack and then not do it.
I really like Erik making that block. Even though Erik's now out of things on the board, if you look at Richard's side of the board, all he has is a 2-2. Erik has so many turns to draw something that matters.
Yeah, and he's got, of course, a lot of huge draws.
Didn't take him long.
That is one of them.
Scavenging Ooze with triple green up, and no shortage of things in graveyards. He's going to go ahead and immediately pump it to a 4-4 to play around Lightning Strike.
And I would be surprised if he makes it a 5-5. I think he's going to try to hold off as long as he can here so that he can play around Selesnya Charm. Although by adding the Mana Confluence to the table, to me it means that he's just going to go, he's going all out here.
And there we go, 2 counters on Scavenging Ooze. And both players just playing off the top here. Nguyen knows that Smith has nothing. Smith probably suspects that Nguyen has nothing and just has lands, but does not know it.
And I think that Erik is probably not going to play around Selesnya Charm ultimately, because if Richard had Selesnya Charm, he definitely would have just cracked it on that Desecration Demon over the course of the last couple of turns. So
yeah,
I think that Erik may be trying to play around Selesnya Charm for a half a beat here, but I think ultimately he's just going to go all the way with Scavenging Ooze and try to kill Erik with that threat.
And really good heads-up play by Erik. The draw for this turn for Richard was Lightning Strike. So heads-up activating on Scavenging Ooze, and now it continues to grow, as you said, right past 5, right up to 5, and it can go. This Ooze can go as high as 10. This is a 2-turn clock.
And Scavenging Ooze is no small addition to this style of control deck.
When you're killing everything, yeah.
I played against a mono Black Devotion list once when I was playing Red Beat Down that sideboarded into Night Howler against me. And my opponent played it, and I thought, I'm just dead. I cannot possibly beat this card. And Scavenging Ooze is like a 2-mana Night Howler in a lot of spots that also gains life. So
it's a much more main deckable Night Howler. Like, it's good in every situation.
Well, the second one's not great. That's the big cost.
Right.
But the first one against aggressive decks is just so good that it kind of doesn't matter what the opportunity cost is.
And that Ooze swung in. Nguyen had immediately chumps while at 17 with the Voice of Resurgence. And he has a land, a Lightning Strike, and one other card. Now, Smith added a Mutavault on his turn. It was a Brave the Elements for Nguyen.
And I don't know exactly how many cards Richard brought in, and he didn't have a lot to sideboard in, so there's some questions there. But I do not like a lot of the cards he's drawn in the post-board games. Lightning Strike's very low impact, and you saw Corsair Crufix in game 1. He just drew a Brave the Elements that I don't think is very well situated to fight the post-board games, and he just does not have enough raw resources to compete with Erik's removal spells and high-impact threats.
Ooze now up to a 9/9. It'll crash. Probably will end up trading with the Brave the Elements. Well, I'll trade with Brave or with the token.
Well, I don't know what else this Brave is supposed to do.
Yep, it's the Brave fogs for a turn.
Boom.
The hard part for Nguyen is how is he going to get enough power on the board? Like, I think what he has to do is get a Fleece Mane Lion and monsters it and hope that there's no removal spell.
Well, if he draws a Selesnya Charm, then he's at least out from under the immediate threat of just dying to the Scavenging Ooze. Right. From there, cards like Xenagos, Domri, Fleece Mane Lion that you just mentioned, those can be pretty powerful draws, but it starts with getting Scavenging Ooze off the table.
Right, so those are the two ways he gets Ooze off the table, are Lion and Charm. I mean, Lion doesn't get it off the table, but it stops it from killing him.
Yeah, at least it stems the tide. If he brought in Banishing Light, he has access to that as well, but you know, against the Abrupt Decay deck, are you bringing in Banishing Light? Less clear to me. So
yeah, it certainly is playing the wrong game plan if you are. And Smith's draw is not too spectacular here. I think he just has more lands.
Yeah, he's flooding out a fair bit. So if Richard has Selesnya Charm in his deck, he plays 2 copies main, none on the board. If he's able to find it, I mean, it's his 1/1 against nothing and the top of each player's deck. That's a game.
He's going to continue the process of he's going to Lightning Strike away the Mutavault. That seems fine. And if he's committed to fogging, I think he just Boros Charms here to fog.
Most likely. And this is another card. Boros Charm's quite powerful, high impact card, but Again, just not something that's very well suited to play in this kind of game, assuming that Erik has the kind of draw that you're worried about.
Mm-hmm.
Which is just all removal spells and some fast Desecration Demon. Yeah.
Yep. So now, just playing off the top of his deck, can Nguyen hit one of the 2 cards that stops the ooze? Remains to be seen. Another land for Smith, and now the chump happens.
Yep.
And Nguyen has one more. He can draw Fleece's Lion next turn, or he can draw Celestial Charm in one of his next 2 turns.
And with Erik keeping on top with the Temple, it's not even clear if Fleece's Lion is going to be a draw anymore.
Very possibly not. A swing for 11 puts Nguyen down to 6. And now it's just Celestia Charm. Does he have it? Let's see, it looks like he has 2 lands. They're joined by Soldier of the Pantheon. That'll buy him a turn.
Yeah.
Maybe.
Another fog, maybe.
And we see Soldier there on his side. Did Smith keep a removal spell?
Well, it's very likely, given that he played nothing and drew a card and said go, that he kept on top. So
Hero's Downfall, and that should do it. And 2-0, Erik Smith defeats Richard Nguyen. Smith moves to 3-1, while Nguyen drops to 2-2.
I don't feel like this is a especially good matchup for Richard. And the fact that Erik has moved further into green for cards like Corsair Crufix, which are also pretty good against Richard's deck. I think the total sum of the matchup is just not very good. You see Richard sideboarding here. He's getting some Banishing Lights out of his deck. I'm not sure if he went any further with that, but I think also the way that he sideboarded, if I was in his spot, I probably would have just removed most of my Brave the Elements, the creature saving tools, just brought in more Planeswalkers, Mizzium Mortars, and more threat. Even Kitting Apparition, you know, you saw Corsair Crufix, you can reasonably assume that Underworld Connections is in the list somewhere, maybe other enchantments.
Right.
I think it's just really hard